Okay, Matt, thank you so much for being here on the podcast today. We're really excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jesse. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, of course, of course. Let's dive into it. So, when we're looking at your background, what first got you into recruiting, and what led you to specializing in healthcare executive search?
I think, it was a period, short 24, 25 years ago that, I had actually had, quite a bit of friends that were working in a healthcare kind of sales capacity. I think just the idea of it intrigued me. It's an innovative industry. They say the only constant in healthcare is change. And
Hmm.
so I think
Yeah.
I was spurred on by that, and the industry and its mission or what it's supposed to do
Hmm.
was intriguing, and that sales, building relationships aspect. I don't think that's changed, Jesse, over the last 24 years. That's my lifeblood. That's what gets me out of bed every day is the opportunity to engage with others, whether that's, existing clients, existing candidates, new candidates. I think that's what drives a lot of us to get into this industry.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like that answer. I know you've got a wealth of knowledge in this, so I'm excited to dive into the details of asking these questions that we've got prepared today. But I'm this is kind of obvious based off of your previous answer, but just to make sure that the audience really understands, who's your typical client and your typical candidate when you're recruiting?
Yeah, so I would say that, my focus from a client standpoint or industry standpoint obviously is healthcare or what we call healthcare adjacent. So I would say that our clients from a healthcare standpoint typically fall into five categories. Well, first, the hospital care delivery systems of varying size. That can be as something as intimate as a independent standalone rural hospital to a large matrix-based care delivery system. We do a lot of work with physician-led, physician-owned, independent, or single specialty, multi-specialty practices where the physicians or surgeons own the practice.
Hmm.
We do some work in senior living. So as we think about that transition from independent to assisted living to skilled nursing and palliative care, quite a bit of work in private equity. So those healthcare organizations, whether they're on the provider side or on the tech side, private equity that owns healthcare in their portfolio, a fair amount of work in private equity, and then mental and behavioral health. So if we think about organizations that provide services for those that have autism, Asperger's, eating disorders, addiction recovery, group homes. So that's what I would say is kind of our traditional, if we call it kind of a bread and butter as an executive search. Our work is focused solely at the board level. So we do recruitment of paid board positions, CEO, and then anything reporting directly into the CEO. So if we think about all the C's, we do a lot of work with the CFO, Chief Operating Officer, Chief Administrative Officer, and then that runs the gamut of Chief Revenue, Chief Strategy Officer, and then also from a human capital, Chief People Officer, Chief Human Resources Officer. So
Hmm.
pretty focused. Obviously, there are some organizations might be structured a little different where you have a president and then you have a leadership team of vice presidents. But that's
Right.
by and large my clients and kind of where we live. From a candidate standpoint, yeah, kind of reflective of the business is that a lot of the candidates that we approach based on our search, all the work we do is on a retained basis at a C-suite level, are typically experienced and tenured executives and senior executives. I think others that do this kind of work, candidates that we approach, come by way typically of a referral and recommendation, but by the
Hmm.
same token, Jesse, aren't out in the market. They are the what we call the obligatory passive candidate. So that gets us back into recruiting and the ability to sell, influence, provide a good value proposition to a candidate like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. I mean, it's a great area to focus in, right? I mean, that's all of our listeners today. So hopefully our listeners can learn a lot from you and get a good understanding. We have a huge amount of listeners that are in the healthcare space as well.
Mhm.
So when when you work closely with boards, CEOs, private equity groups, what are they really looking for when hiring, C leaders today?
Yeah, I think depending on the C-suite role itself, I would say for obvious reasons, institutional knowledge, experience at that C-suite level. Healthcare is it's not an easy time for healthcare right now. I hear every day the headwinds that are facing healthcare. one big beautiful bill, the impact of just compression to reimbursement rates. So, it's a C-suite leader that's gritty, is experienced, but also does not lose sight of there's maybe that question of money over mission. Doesn't lose sight of we still have to have a organization that financially is stable, if not thriving. By the same token, let's not forget why we're here, and that's really directed at the care of an individual and their family. So I think that having a really good EQ can read the room. We're in healthcare, so I think that that's a component that's a piece. In a
Yeah.
lot of areas of healthcare, it's a heavily regulated compliance environment as well. So the knowledge base of that.
Yeah.
Um, but I think I think a lot of it today is financial acumen and just understanding where we at as an organization and not only how we survive, but how we thrive. And where are there opportunities for efficiency versus where there's opportunities for growth and improvement.
Mm, mm. I like that. And honestly, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but what I see with all the executives I'm speaking with just every day is the beauty at the C level is lots of times, they've lived their career, they've done really well, they know the experience, they know their industry, and it's the point where they're actually like, "Hey, I love what I do. I'm
Mhm.
actually good at what I do." It's
Yeah,
not a
yeah,
I need to
yeah,
prove it anymore, and it's a I talk to a lot of C leaders. They're like, honestly, the financial side, I'm going to get paid well, but that's
yeah,
not my main focus. I want to go to an organization that I can help grow, thrive. I've
yeah.
done this before. I can do it again.
Mhm,
I'm
mhm.
assuming that's what you're seeing as well with these positions that a lot of these companies are looking for.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think 2 points to that. One, one of the things that we try to identify, Jesse, with these passive C-suite candidates is, um, it's kind of a general question of how things are going. But I think what we try to better understand is, are they going to the point of, I've been here for 3 to 4 to 5 years. I think we've accomplished a lot. Yeah, there may be a little bit more work to be done, but maybe I'm at a point where I've been in this organization and I feel there's nowhere further to go, and maybe I'm feeling a bit more in a maintenance mode. I've been here
Mhm.
4 or 5 years. I'm proud of the work that we've done, things we've overcome, things we've accomplished.
Yeah.
Run rate, I think, in our world for a C-suite executive today, it looks to be 5 to 7 years, 6 to 8 years.
Hmm.
I think that's one of the things, Jesse, that we're trying to better understand is that inflection point of like a lot of things in life, timing.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big one for C-suites is just are you continuing to be engaged? Is there more coming? I think that's one of the things oftentimes that we look for to better understand is just where you're at in your journey in your current
Mhm.
role within your current organization.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate you saying that. We see that all the time, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's, there's usually a cap at what a company can offer and what the executive can offer the company. And lots of times they're like, look, I love this company. I've been successful with
Yep.
them, but there's a point where fresh eyes, me going somewhere else and somebody else being able to fill this position will be more beneficial for everybody, right?
Yep. Yep.
That's
Yep.
also the nice thing. You usually, I mean, not usually, but lots of times you get a lot of more easier separations where it's a good timing. If they come to that conclusion, it doesn't always happen,
Yep.
though, right?
Yep. I would I
Yeah,
would also say, Jesse, in the private equity world, at the C-suite level, there is an aim and goal, and the reality is that a lot of that is to drive top line, bottom line, EBITDA, net income, profit, and we are approaching an exit. And a lot of these C-suites, I term them as kind of operational athletes. So it's a big load, it's a big push, and we get
yeah,
to a sale or exit. There is usually A, they see it coming, and B, there's an appetite to go do it again. So
yeah,
again, it's incumbent upon us to bring a compelling story to someone like that while gauging timing and motivation.
yeah. Yeah, I like that operational athlete. I mean, it's a good way to put it with the private equity
Yeah,
world. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not an expert in the private equity world, but everything that I know about it sounds about right, right?
Mhm.
And so
Yep.
I'm curious though, when you're evaluating candidates, what's one thing that helps someone stand out immediately at the executive level?
For me, that's an easy one, Jesse, is execution and outcomes.
Mm,
A lot of our clients, whether it be a board or at the C level, are looking for what have you gotten done? I mean, even to the standpoint of resumes, I very experienced, very talented C-suite sometimes They do a nice job of articulating that, whether it be on a resume or in a conversation, in terms of the role, its responsibility, what it does. What I
Hmm.
want to understand is what have you gotten done? So, there's a reality in our world at this level of looking for things like dollar signs, percentages, growth, efficiency, cut costs. So I think though that for me, very high level out of the gate are the things that I want to understand in that 5 to 7 year journey. What have you gotten done, your team, and what does this organization look like today versus when you got there? It's a question that we ask our clients when we're amid a C-suite search is, um,
Hmm.
what does success look like in this role after a year? After we've done our work, we've placed the C-suite, and whether it be you as a board or a CEO says, that was a really great hire. We want to understand why. After 12 months, what about it? So I would say that that's a big one. It's just ultimately at this level, it's about outcome execution. Um, and I think also delivery. At this level, there are times at the CEO level where you got a lot of audiences, Jesse. You've got a board, you've got a
Hmm.
C-suite leadership team. Sometimes at the C-suite level, you need to flex down. So you need to meet people where they're at to get buy-in
Hmm.
for people to believe in what we're trying to do. Not you just as the C-suite, but as the organization. I think also as a C-suite, it's important to instill in others if there is change the why behind it. They may not agree with it, but I think to better understand why are we doing this, that's a big one. I think that is an earmark of great leaders is if we have to make tough decisions, if we have to make change, that we're able to articulate why we're doing it. And I'm looking for you to help me to get on board with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes a very mature leader to be able to do that and understand that and word it in a way that people can be on board
Yep.
and follow it.
Yep.
I mean, also going back to the responsibilities versus the outcomes, right? I mean, it's like the climax or the pivot point of, of your brand, of your resume, right? I mean, we talk to people about it all the time. It's really at the executive level, VP, C-level executives. It's what differentiates you from a chat GPT resume versus an actual resume that's been thought out and knows your background. And,
Right.
you've actually said it, right? You either have outcomes or you don't. People aren't hiring because you can just run a team at this point.
Right.
Hiring because you have specific outcomes that they can take you and put you somewhere else that you can do it for the next organization.
Yep. Absolutely.
So
Yep.
I appreciate you sharing all that. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, what's the most common mistakes you're seeing executives make in the healthcare space right now?
I think, Jesse, and some of this at times can be reflective of the market, the
Yeah.
economy, job huggers. That's what I would
Yeah.
say. I think there are some that,
Mm.
there's a delicate balance of when to jump and when to stay.
Yeah.
But I think there are those that have at times a tendency to stay too long, because, hey, I made it through a riff.
Hmm.
Um, there is a level of uncertainty in the marketplace. Um, so I think that, the ability, and I think I would make this comment, Jesse, in any market,
Hmm.
the ability to afford yourself the opportunity to have a conversation about a new opportunity, a new organization. Whether that's through me as a recruiter or you just get contacted by an organization, I think the willingness before rendering a decision of, hey, I'm going to stay put and that's not for me. I think a
Hmm.
lot of it is about having some dialogue first. It's a little, admittedly, just as a little tongue in cheek, but I liken it a little
Yeah.
bit to the first date. If you're not
Yeah.
willing to have it with him or her, you're never going to get to a second one. So those
Right.
are things that I think even at a C-suite level that we instill is, hey, if there's enough here in the story that I'm bringing to you, afford yourself that opportunity to have the conversation, and you have the right of refusal after you have that conversation. But then, we pride ourselves as recruiters in being very detailed, that we get as much information as we can, correct information.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there's an intrinsic conversation that needs to have happen between a C-suite and an organization. We call it lightning in a bottle. And is it going to be there or is it not? There's only one way to find out. So that probably over the last 25 years, probably the one observation I would say to that.
Yeah. And do you? I mean, it makes sense with the market, right? When the market's going down, people hold on to their jobs a little bit
Absolutely.
tighter.
Right.
I mean, what
Yep.
we see all the time is, people talk to us and be like, "Hey, I don't need to have a new job right now. I don't need to make a change, so I'm not gonna work on my resume yet." And
Yep.
what we have to coach and teach a lot of times is, hey, if you wait until you're out of a job to start working on this, you're a
Absolutely.
little behind, right? And the
Entirely.
same thing with recruiting, right?
Yep. Yep.
And I'm sure you see that all the time, especially with people not nurturing their network, not having conversations, seeing what's out there
Yep.
because they wait and
Yep.
then they're out of a job and then it's
Absolutely. Yep. Jesse, we refer to it as being in a position of strength. When you're in an organization with stability, you've got a role that you enjoy, an organization that you believe in, someone that you report to, who you have a good relationship, good connectivity with. As odd or as ironic as it may sound, that's the time.
Mhm.
In general, that's the time to have conversations versus to your point when you're on the bench. That conversation feels different.
Yeah.
I would agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like taking care of your body and your mind, right? I
Right?
mean, the time to take care of your body is not when you're sick, right? I mean,
Yep.
you should, you have to go through extra measures, but you should take care of yourself a little bit before then to
Yep.
prevent something like that from
Yep.
happening.
Yep.
So,
And,
yeah.
and I think I instill in candidates, especially those that are passive and gainfully employed, is this is also your opportunity to interview an organization.
Mm,
That door doesn't swing one way, it swings both ways. So here's the opportunity, for you to, as a passive candidate, to go into a conversation with your own set of questions and see how they respond as well.
yeah. And especially the strength you're talking about in an uncertain market, that's the best time, right? I mean, you're not sure
Absolutely.
about the market, but you can have a conversation and you can, calmly or in a nice and easy way pull back from the opportunity or engage in it. And it's not going to hurt you. But when you
Yeah.
got your entire career and your family's
Yep.
food on the line, that's
Yep.
more pressure.
You bet. And I would also say, and I think people are aware of this, that whether it's at an executive, senior executive level, these roles as they come available, Jesse, are a little more at a premium.
Hmm.
It's these C-suite roles. There's arguably a bit more of a rarity as those come available. So when they do, I think it behooves someone if there's an opportunity to have that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm curious, what would you say is Well, when somebody's qualified, they're qualified for a position, right? But they're not getting traction in today's market. What do you typically see as the reason, one of the main reasons why?
Well, I would say I think some of it is if they're not getting traction, I think some of that is the manner in which they're going about it. This world is changing, and we talk every day about AI and BI and resume scraping, and so I think there's that you can go at that a number of different ways of you're applying for things, and we go down the rabbit hole around resumes and scraping and keywords and things like that. I would say more so at a VP and C-suite level. One, I think the market today dictates there is more talent on the street, or
Mhm.
there are more out there, and there aren't as many of these executive and senior executive roles. But I would say that old adage, Jesse, is you're leaning into that leadership network. I think that
Mhm.
good old fashioned networking. I do it every day. That's oftentimes where we see things get done is relationships. I talk with plenty of C-suite leaders that say, Matt, this is a little clunky to me. This is a little foreign to me because I've never really had to interview for a job.
Yeah.
Either I've been promoted or I've got a former peer or colleague that went over to ABC company and reached back out to me. Um,
Hmm.
so I think a lot of that is around really utilizing your network. Sure, platforms like LinkedIn are very helpful, but I would say again at this level, at an executive level, it's leaning into that network. And I would also say, yeah, use your recruiters. Sometimes those that we work with that have never worked with an executive search firm before say to me, Matt, am I relegated to just working with you? And I say, absolutely not. I wouldn't recommend it. I think, the goal here is for you to find that new opportunity, that new organization, that new home. If we can play a part in that role, terrific. If we can be a resource, that's great. But I would say where there are opportunities to have conversations, if you've got executive search firms or recruiters calling you, and you feel, or they're sending you a note and you feel like at a minimum it's worth your time, I think there's value in having those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I love that mindset too, right? It's not like you can be the only person to place them, right? There's
Without
a
a doubt.
there's a lot of great opportunities that are out there, and
Yep.
really, I mean, there's just so many different ways to look at it. But the networking piece, right? I mean, it's honestly becoming it's funny because 10 years ago, I probably would have said no, it's going to be less relevant because of AI and all the information and things, but it's becoming more relevant because people are liking the human touch of everything,
You
right?
bet.
Human aspect.
Yep.
I just had a client of ours, not a client, but somebody we're working with, helping with the resume, and he actually got his next position from seeing an old friend from 10 years ago at a funeral.
Entirely.
He leaned over to him and said, "Hey, I'm looking in the next 6 months." And he's like, I will message you in 6 months from today."
Mhm.
Messaged him. Now he's in a new position,
Okay.
right?
Right.
Right. And
Absolutely.
he had his brand ready. He did the work beforehand and his resume and everything, but it was the network, right? The
Yep.
network created it, and he was able to seal the deal with the information he had on hand.
Right.
So
Yep.
I
Yep.
think it's so crucial for people to understand. But um, what I'm seeing many organizations say they're struggling to find leadership talent as well. And so, where do you see the biggest disconnect between the employers and the candidates today?
That's a good question. I think it just more than anything, I would say it's the likelihood of just a lack of kind of awareness of the candidate themselves and their status. And we have organizations that and clients that through their efforts of talent acquisition, they do the outreach. But the awareness of candidates that are kind of discreetly in the market, and I think at times that's why you utilize an executive search firm partner.
Hmm.
Conversely, yeah, just the awareness of an organization and that need. The folks that we work with, Jesse, at the VP and C-suite level while working, they don't have a lot of time, to go into the market and be looking for a new opportunity. So I guess I regress back to kind of my conversation or my comment of relationships. That I think that's probably one of the greater challenges at the executive level is the awareness of who these individuals are, and conversely, these opportunities. One example I'll give to you is that a lot of the work that we're doing right now with organizations is based or predicated on planned succession planning.
Hmm.
We're seeing a segment of the labor population, baby boomers, retiring. It's already started. We'll probably see it continue for the next 2 to 4, 3 to 5 years. But an external candidate may not know that.
Hmm.
So the awareness of an opportunity, I don't know that organizations oftentimes post these C-suite or vice president level roles. Some do, and some don't. So I think it's maybe that's a bit of a plug for our industry and executive search, but I think just
Yep.
the disconnect is kind of the awareness of or lack of the opportunity, as well as not only candidates but the right type of candidates.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the beauty of the executive search is you can know people that are passively looking, right? The
Yep.
companies are not limited. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know the companies are not limited to just people that are saying open to work on LinkedIn, right? They're
Right.
not limited to only their resources, right? Brought into the
Sure.
network, using recruiting firms, using recruiters to make sure that you're working together and can fill that position with the right person, right? And you
Yep.
can fill a
Yep.
position, but if you fill it with the wrong person, that's an expensive mistake, especially at the C level, right? That's a
Yeah, you
critical
bet. It's
mistake.
an expensive mistake. I think also one of the things that we try to understand with an organization is timing, priority, sense of urgency. So some of these come to us, we call them 911 calls and dumpster fires, and we had to let someone go or someone just walked. Doesn't happen a lot, but from time to time, versus, as I mentioned, succession planning, transition based on planned retirement. That's a lot, as you would imagine, Jesse, that's a lot calmer. So we can also give candidates and those passive candidates a sense of pace of this
Uh,
process. Is this something that I got a phone call earlier this week about a C-suite role, and this isn't now. This is we're going to start working on this next week versus, hey, we've got some time. We knew this was coming. We've also had the opportunity to think about the role and what it looks like going forward versus what it's
Mhm.
been like over the last 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm curious with what we're talking about with what the companies are looking for, right? Also, what traits are you seeing be more relevant or more needed in the market today for the candidate?
Yeah, I would say AI is here, Jesse. I would say
Yeah.
that that is probably one of the more impactful things I or we started hearing about this 5, 10 years ago. It's
Hmm.
arrived. We're using it. It's going to drive
Right.
a lot of things to include in my niche industry in healthcare. So where I'll give you an example, we had a call with a client that said our CFO planned retirement's been with us 37, 38 years. She's retiring. The owners attended a conference and said, one of the things we're looking for in our CFO is their knowledge base of AI as we think about things like predictive staffing, labor models. So,
Mm.
how the CFO utilizes AI or business intelligence in partnership with our chief human resources officer and our CEO. That's new. That's not
Yeah.
something that we've historically heard a lot about. Fun to hear, and I wanted to learn more about that. But
Yeah.
I think those are some things that the not only the awareness, but the experience, the agility, and the ability to utilize AI as a resource, as a value add to an organization. I think that's one of the things we continue to hear.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is that we've got a labor market because of some transition. How those that are in their 20s and 30s perceive work and jobs and careers. And I could go at that at 8 different angles, but things like fully remote versus hybrid versus being on site all the time. Now we've seen in the last couple of years that post-COVID, a call back to work. What impact has that had? Those are things that we're asking of C-suites of what is your experience in your organization with these type of phenomenons that are more prevalent just in the last 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah, which goes back to I mean, the hitting the point on outcomes versus responsibilities, where you kind of have to
Correct.
almost start mixing it a little bit because we are in an interesting time point
Right.
where AI hasn't been here for decades. So it's like I've got these responsibilities where I'm doing it, and then these are the outcomes I'm starting to see that I am seeing. And I'm honestly seeing, I mean, Tony Robbins, I get his ads all the time, right? And
Yep. Sure.
I see his ads talking about, hey, there's a difference between people that are AI is not going to replace them, but it's
Yep.
causing a real shift and a
Yep.
split in the market of
Yep.
people that are leaning into it and people that
Yep.
aren't.
Yep.
You know?
I would also add data. At the C-suite level, that experience of the utilization of KPIs, benchmarks, metrics. What are the numbers telling us? What is the data telling us to drive decisions? Our clients and organizations are asking that of us around particular specific candidates. Is there utilization of data? How do they do it? So those are also questions we're asking routinely. We're asking quite a bit of C-suites.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I I guess that actually goes into my next question, the trends of hiring in the market. Is there anything else you want to add to that with different trends that you've seen besides AI? You don't have to, but I'm curious if there's anything else that comes to mind.
Well, I think organizations look to us to help with the assessment of an executive leader that maybe has not as of yet bubbled up to the vice president or C-suite level. And
Mm,
so are they ready? As we see a shift, and again, we see a segment of the labor population retiring, right? That provides a good deal of opportunity for your kind of middle management, your director level. Are they
mm,
ready to make that transition to a VP or C-suite? And
mm,
it takes a village. That's our assessment of these individuals on a case by case basis in partnership with our client and with our human resources executive. Are they ready to make this transition? There's the old adage of, at the management level, you're managing staff. At the director level, you're managing managers who in turn are managing staff. At the VP C-suite level, You see where that conversation goes. So I think that's one of many things. And that, at a management, at a director level, maybe not as much exposure to a P&L, to a balance
Mm.
sheet, to an income statement. So what's the financial acumen versus where are the gaps?
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. I hope that people will go back and listen to this, re-listen to it when they're attacking the market, when they're looking to hire, because there's a lot of golden nuggets in here. And so, Matt, what's the best way for potential candidates, potential clients to reach out to you to learn more, to connect with you and follow what you're doing?
Yeah, I would say probably the best is just to my LinkedIn profile. That's where I think is a great place, at least for start. I get a lot of inbound from clients and candidates, and from there have some messaging back and forth, and then if appropriate, scheduling initial phone calls.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah,
We'll make sure to include that link in the bio
that'd be great.
for this podcast episode. And Matt, thank you so much for being a great guest. We appreciate having you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jesse.
Yeah, thank you.